Good morning. We will be getting started here in a couple of minutes. Well, good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started to be considerate of everyone's time. My name is Paula McCain, and I'm a recovery business advisor for North Central Texas Small Business Development Center. Today is National Chocolate Cake Day. So after the webinar, I will be heading to the bakery for my lunch of chocolate cake. The SBDC is a leading provider of assistance for small businesses. We are grant funded, and because of that, we can offer our services to you and webinars such as today's webinar to you at no cost. Today's webinar is Pinpointing Your Brand and Target Market with Melissa Forziat. Please put your questions in the chat room, and the presenter will get to them during her presentation. Would like to introduce Melissa. She's a Southern California-based marketer, speaker, and consultant and author. She teaches small businesses how to market on a budget and helps them execute their marketing strategies, in addition to working with business organizations to train their trainers. She offers keynotes, presentations, workshops, and webinars, and her national and international speaking schedule has taken her as far as New Zealand. To date, she's delivered over 120 workshops and webinars to thousands of attendees. Before starting Melissa Forziat events and marketing, her career involved roles with the Olympic Winter Games, as those are coming up next week, Rugby World Cup, and the U.S. Olympic Committee. She's the author of a free ebook called Small Business Marketing on a Budget. Welcome, Melissa. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'll go ahead and get my slides up on the screen here in just a moment. Please stand by for that. Thank you so much for having me. First of all, National Chocolate Cake Day. I feel like I'm the representative you need for today's webinar. This is great news. And thank you again so much to everybody at the North Central Texas SBDC, but especially Paula and Lori and Brett for getting all of this organized. And this is a second series that we've done. We're 2 webinars in now to the second series, and hopefully it's giving everybody an opportunity to learn a lot about marketing and all the different elements that you need to consider to have a successful marketing plan. Before I jump into any content here, I'll tell you a little bit more about myself, which may add a bit more context to the material. So I started out, as Paula mentioned, in major international sport events. So as she mentioned, Olympic Winter Games, Rugby World Cup, worked with the US Olympic Committee. So we're getting to my favorite point of a year, this Olympic time. And it was really interesting to start out in that world because those are such huge, massive brands. The projects are so large. You end up getting this really big an understanding of what something looks like when it's operating at that scale and that scope. And everybody has their own constituent groups that they're looking after and their own piece of the project that they have to manage. And for me, that was actually a really interesting insight into different target markets and what that looks like, and how you can all be representing sort of the same brand, the same company, but when you're talking to different people, you may have to have totally different conversations. And for me, that actually quite informs what it looks like when you're a small business owner, because we often have multiple audiences and we need to know what to say to them to make sure that they listen to us, to make sure we get their attention, and then to make sure we hold their attention long enough where they'd want to become our customers. And that brings us to pinpointing your brand and target market. Now I'm a small business owner myself. I'm sure many of you who are listening are micro business owners just like me. And we have to be really diligent with our resources when we're small business owners trying to market. We have to be smart about the messages that we say, and we have to be efficient in how we reach the people we're trying to reach. And so hopefully this material today will give you some new insight into how to be as direct as possible with the people that you need to reach and say what they need to hear. So having said all that, a few quick housekeeping items that I want to make sure we take care of before we jump in here. First of all, as we go through this presentation, I encourage everybody to be on mute here, but I do encourage you on your end. These presentations will always be more beneficial to you if you're able to think about your business in the context of the material I'm presenting. So if there is something happening on the back end on your side that's distracting you that you can shut off, please go ahead and do that now. That could be the ringer on your phone. It could be a messaging device. The more you're able to limit the distractions on your end, the more you're going to be able to think about the material as we go through it. Now, there are quite a few slides here that are meant to be resources for you and even exercises for you along the way, so you may want them later. I'm going to make sure that I give this whole slide deck over to the SBDC so that they can get that out to those who request it. And in addition to all of that, if you have questions as we're going through live here, for those who are on with us live, feel free to put those into the chat as we go through, but I'll especially save time for questions at the end after you've had a chance to absorb all the material. We'll try to address those as we go. There may be a few times along the way that I pose a question to you. And if you're on with us live here, feel free to put your response into the chat. And if you're not, feel free to just take a moment to think about it before you move on in the presentation, so that once again, we can really root all of this material to what's happening in your specific business. Now, having said all that, why are we having this conversation today? Well, a lot of times people think that they only have one big audience that they need to reach, and it actually limits their ability to reach them effectively. So it helps to realize that you probably have more target markets than you think you do, or at least if you have one big audience, you probably have multiple segments of that audience that you can reach specifically with specific words. So I wanted to give you an example through my own business. Obviously I am a speaker, and most of the time I'm speaking with small businesses who are trying to market, just as I am today. Well, if I were to approach every single talk the exact same way, they wouldn't be equally useful to everybody, because I have learned that I have to be a bit nuanced in my delivery in different places, depending on a lot of factors. Am I in a metropolitan or a rural area, or is it mixed? Am I speaking to one industry or to many industries? Am I speaking to businesses that have budget or businesses that don't have budget? There may be regional differences in how people think about their business. And there's so many different factors that I have learned I need to account for as I'm delivering material. Even if the base material is similar, I usually have to convey it in a different way. So for me to say that small businesses is my target market would actually be really limiting me from connecting to the audience that I'm in front of day to day. So when I'm speaking to a group, there are certain things I want to know about them, and it helps me tailor that presentation, and that becomes the segments of my own audience. Now, that's a specific example to my business, but I hope it starts to give you that indication that you may very well have different audiences or different segments of your audience, and you would be more effective in reaching them with a specific message. So we're going to talk all about that today, but that hopefully sets up for you what we're aiming to do today and what I hope you'll get out of today's session. Now, how are we going to get there? First, we're going to talk about the foundation of your marketing, just really lay the groundwork for what we're trying to do here. Then we're going to talk about who are your target markets. Then we're going to switch back over to brand. We're going to talk about creating a brand that speaks to the target market that you've now said you have. And then lastly, we'll close out with some psychological tricks to capture attention of your audience. And that's kind of my favorite part, because it's always interesting to see some of the little tips and tricks you can do that can help push you over the line. All right, so hopefully everybody is in the right place here. Let's go ahead and talk about pinpointing your brand and target market. Now, the first thing I want to do here is pose a question to you. If you're on with us live, this is a great time to write your response into the chat. But if you're not on with us live, just take a moment and really think about where you're at in your business right now. How would you describe where you are in your business at this moment? Are you new to business? Are you settled in business? Maybe you've been in business, but you're rebranding. Or maybe you're in business, you're not rebranding, but you are launching something new that perhaps has a new market that you need to break into. Or, maybe your business and your audience have been drastically impacted or have been having a rolling impact from the pandemic, and you're trying to navigate what that means for your business or your audience. So if you're on with me live and you want to put your thoughts in the chat about where you are, that's great. And if you're not, understanding exactly where you are will help you understand the context that you need to create around creating your brand and creating your target market here, and how relevant it is to you for all the different segments that you're trying to reach. So awesome. Let's see, it's settled, but definitely still navigating COVID world. Absolutely. I mean, so many of us are, right? I feel like that category is probably relevant for many of the businesses listening in. Thank you for sharing that. So now that we're kind of getting a sense of where we are, I have somebody else who's written new and one to start up. So you've got a little bit of both. You've got one in ideation phase and you've got one in the new phase. This is a great time to be looking at this information to really set a direction for who you're trying to reach. I'm so glad you're with us here. And as we're thinking about that, let's jump in and start talking about the foundation of your marketing, and hopefully wherever you are in your business, we'll be able to use this to lay the groundwork and grow from there. Now, I like a good metaphor. And with this, I think the relevant metaphor is that a home is only as solid as the foundation it's built upon. And you can look at a home like this and it looks so beautiful up top, but it's really the fact that it has a strong base that allows it to stand. And you can see that difference there with the next image we've got here. The foundation is ultimately the key to the rest of the structure being solid and holding up and standing the test of time. Now, it's actually the same thing for your marketing plan. Having a solid plan in place will allow you to market better and more effectively, and hopefully generate more sales over time. But what is the foundation of your marketing? Now, obviously today we're talking about both target markets and brand, and I consider both of those things very important to the overall foundation of your marketing. But if I were to pick one that is the true base, it's your target markets. Because knowing who your audience is or your audience is, it tells you everything else you need to know about what you're trying to set up for your messaging. So let's take a closer look at this. I know I'm going to say target markets a lot during this presentation. So let's put a definition around this that we can all use as a working definition for today and maybe even going forward. Your target markets are the people who would be most likely to be interested in your product, your service, your program, your idea, whatever it is you are selling. These are the people who would be most likely to want to buy it. And I hope that it makes sense that you want to get in front of these people, right? Because if you're in a room full of people who would never be interested to buy what you sell and you keep talking to them, you're probably wasting that time more often than not. But if you're in a room full of people who could be interested in what you sell and you stay in that space and you keep connecting with them, you're going to find that over time, more and more people become ready and the conditions will be right for more and more people to accept your calls to action or accept your offers. So we want to put ourselves in spaces that give us opportunity. And really, that's being in front of your target market and a place where you can deliver your message. So this is really what we're aiming for when we market. But the trick here is that you probably have more than one. And it's happened so many times where I've talked about target market with small business owners and somebody's raised their hand and said, I think I'm reaching more than one audience. And they think that's an exception to the rule, but it's actually the rule. Most of us are reaching multiple audiences, and it really becomes a matter of defining them each as crystal clear as we can and having a very solid message that we're going to deliver to each one separately. That tends to be the most effective way to get in front of them. So if you are, in a situation where you've got one or more than one target market, again, that is the foundation of your marketing. And why is it so important that we know our target markets? Well, knowing your target market informs a lot of other decisions that you can make in your business. So here's some examples, right? If you don't know who your audience is, you wouldn't know what pain points you're offering resolves. How can you know what their problem is if you don't know who they are? So defining one will help you define the other. Now, if you don't know your audience, you also wouldn't know where to put your message. If you don't know who they are, how could you know where they are so that you could start speaking to them? If you don't know your audience, you also wouldn't know how to package your message or product. We often have a matter of seconds to cut through the noise of the world and get people's attention. And so how we package our message, whether it be visual or not, is a way that we can break through and get somebody's attention, get their focus, and hopefully hold it. And how we package it matters. We're going to talk more about that in the psychology section. And in addition to that, or maybe as an extension of that, what language to use in your marketing is also going to be informed by this, because different people, different target markets might be triggered by different word choices. And so the more we know about those people, the more we can use the words we know will resonate. If you don't know your audience, you flat out wouldn't know what your brand should be, because ultimately your brand, your message to your audience should be based on what your audience needs to hear from you to understand that the message is for them. So it helps to know them first and then craft the message on the back of that. If you don't know your audience, you also wouldn't know what would motivate them to buy what you sell. Now, a lot of times I think you'll find there are people kind of hovering around your business. There's interest, they're kind of listening, but they haven't bought anything yet. Sometimes it takes people a little while to actually make the decision to make a purchase for some of our businesses. But if you really know your audience, you can start to better understand what is going to be that one motivating factor that's going to push them from lingering to taking action. The more you understand that, the more you can plant that in your marketing. Lastly, if you don't know your audience, you maybe flat out wouldn't know what to offer, right? Because so many times our best offerings come from solving the problems of the audience we know. And, it may be that your business revolves around one specific product or service that you're going to roll out to everybody. But sometimes we also develop new offerings or new ways, new spin, new ways of putting it out there based on what we have learned about our target market. So when you think of all of this together, you start to understand that target market really is the center point and your brand grows around it. Now, having said that, I understand it's really good idea that we need to know our target markets. But how do you get there? How do you start defining who they are? Well, it's worth saying that target markets aren't defined with just one or two words. So like I told you earlier with my business, Melissa, who's your target market? And I said small businesses. There's a lot of different types of small businesses out there. And I wouldn't try to reach every single one of them exactly the same way. So I'm probably going to want to segment it out for my own audience. For you, what does this look like? If you've been just putting one or two words to define your target market, I bet you can get more specific, especially knowing that you've probably got multiple segments of your audience. So how can we start putting more language to it to define it better for ourselves? Now, I'm going to give you a couple different exercises that you can do as we go through this presentation. This first one is more directly, more head-on, helping you research what target markets you have. It really takes it from a straight-on angle of just asking questions to do the research. So let's look at this first, right? Now, this exercise would be like, you get a separate piece of paper for each target market that you're trying to define, or a separate row of a spreadsheet, or for the people who are visual, maybe you create a separate avatar for each target market. The point here is we want to keep them completely separate from each other in your head as you're working through these questions so that you can see how distinct they are and not blend them together. So however many target markets you have, create that many separate spaces for yourself. And then we're going to go through a list of questions for each audience. Now, the first question is actually a pretty simple one. It's just an either or. Is this audience business to business or business to consumer in terms of your marketing, B2B or B2C? Now, I know sometimes people want to throw in more language around that, like, oh, well, it's really more like this. But chances are it still breaks down to B2B or B2C. So let's start there, because that actually changes the questions 2, 3, and 4, depending on what your answer is. So again, each piece of paper, is this audience B2B or a B2C audience? Now, depending on which one you have, your who questions are probably going to switch a little bit. Again, we're going to go through each separate piece of paper, and for each audience, who is this target market? Well, if you have a B2B audience in front of you, right, if that's who you're trying to flesh out, you're going to ask certain questions like maybe, are there certain categories or types of companies that you're trying to reach with certain mission statements? Do they have to be a certain company size, perhaps? Do they have a certain value systems that they need to subscribe to? Is there a specific role at that company that you need to reach? Like if you're trying to reach a company, but you really need the accountant and you just reached the marketing person, your message might not bridge that gap. So the more clear that you can get about not only the company profile, but also the organization profile or business profile, but also the profile of the type of person you need to reach at that company. This is going to help you figure out the who of your business to business market. Now, if we're selling to a business to consumer, B2C audience, you're going to have some different who questions. You're going to want to know things like, is there a certain age range of this group? Am I trying to sell to men or women or a mix? Are you trying to sell to people who are wine lovers or dog owners? Are you trying to sell to people who speak a certain language? Not all these questions are going to matter to your business, but which ones do? Which are the factors that are relevant for your audience? After you've defined who for each target market, now we look at where. And I look at that 2 different ways. The first way is geographically. On a map, where are these people, if that matters? So maybe your business you're selling internationally. Great. Maybe you're selling all across the US, or just certain states, or just Texas, or just a certain region of Texas, or just a certain city, or you're on Main Street and that's the only thing you care about. How specifically on a map can you pinpoint where your audience is located? But once you've done that, that's not quite enough, right? Because if you said, I need to be on Main Street, well, you can't just pick a corner of Main Street and shout your message and hope people will hear it. You really want to get in front of people based on the behaviors that they have. Where are they physically going to be all day long? So what you would do for this. Now that you figured out geographically where your audience is, that could be helpful. Now we need to know where they are behaviorally. So what does your audience do all day long? Where are you likely to find them? You know, where are they? Are they going to school? Are they going to work? Are they picking up their kids after work? Are they or after school? Are they going to church? Are they going bowling on Thursday nights? Do they go to the bar across the street after bowling? What do they do all day? Where do they get their news? Stuff like this to show you where are my options for reaching them. So you go through and you start to define this for each audience. And then that brings us to question 4. Again, not only for each audience, but for each location where you can find them. The question is, how can you reach them there? So in each of those places, do they have bulletin boards, places where you can put flyers? Can you put a verbal message out there? Do they have an intercom where you can speak to them? Do they just have snail mail or newsletters? There are so many different ways that you could potentially reach this audience, but how can you do that in each of these locations? Now, if you have done this work and you've done this research for each of these different audiences, you have a huge amount of information, right? You know who they are, you know where they are, you know how you can reach them. Now all you need is your message and you just need to be there. So this may seem like a daunting task. This may seem like a lot of research and a lot of work to do, but I want you to think what's on the other side of that. You have given yourself the power to have a successful marketing plan, to effectively get in front of your audience each time you spend time or money reaching out to them. It is worth it to do work like this upfront so that you can be more effective down the road with your marketing and ultimately your sales. So some things to consider here. How would you do this work? For one thing, if you have members of your audience already, start thinking about those people. Start using them as your avatar. Start asking them questions or surveying them. That's a great thing to do when you've already got an audience. If you don't already have an audience, because I know we've got at least one new business that's listening in here. This is where you start doing that market research. That's something I'm sure the SBDC has resources to support you with. If you go back to them and you ask some of these questions, they can probably help you dig up some of those answers. But this is also where you can go down internet rabbit holes as well. Sometimes I'll go to social media to see examples of people in my audience and who else they're following, what other businesses they're following. Start to develop a profile around these businesses. There's so many tools out there to do market research. But these types of questions will really help you sort those answers that you need. Now, having said that, and I do want to, by the way, as we get into this, if Brett or Paula want to mention anything about SBDC resources to do market research, I do want to give you an opportunity to throw that in there, but I don't want to put you on the spot. So if you do have something, let me know and you can jump in as we get to the next section. Okay. Do you have anything that you want to share?
Yeah, actually, just the fact that we do indeed have a great research team. And for our clients that come in, if it's needed for perhaps doing a feasibility study for a project that they're working on or an expansion, they just want more information about the area or their competitors, etc. Like you're saying, it depends on your audience. Maybe you're just looking for information about what your target audience might be and to see how many people in that area would be affected by it. We'll be happy to use those resources for anybody.
Awesome. So right there, you're already getting an answer on what the next step is for you. So you've got a few different options to pursue if this is an exercise that you want to start doing. Now, I wanted to give you an example of what it can really mean and how it matters when you start to define different audiences. So I thought, is there a company that I can go and sleuth through their website and see if I can figure out who their target markets are? So here's an example from Nike. This is a business that probably most of us have heard of. We probably recognize this logo. And if you don't, you're probably not far off of remembering as I start to talk about it. I was curious to see, would I actually know who Nike's target markets are by looking at their website? So with that particular business, I have the luxury of looking at their filters on their website when you're looking for products and you're looking for shoes or apparel. So what are their different levels? Well, they have the first level, which is they break down their filters into, are you looking for products for men, women, or boys and girls? So they break it down into those 3 buckets. to begin with, but they don't stop there. Then for each of them, so for both men and for women separately, they've got this full list. Are you looking for lifestyle, running, training and gym, basketball, Jordan, football, soccer, baseball, golf, all the way down to easy on and off? Now, each of these categories suggests a completely different audience and a completely different need. So it's probably, I'm guessing, if Nike's trying to, work off of these target markets, they're going to have a completely different ad campaign and a completely different marketing solution for the easy on and off group and the training and gym group or the basketball group, right? So, for basketball, they're probably going to have models who are playing basketball or who are basketball players. They're probably going to be using language about basketball. They're going to put their marketing in places where people who play basketball are, right? Easy on and off, very different category. They're going to be looking for people who are looking. This could be maybe more seniors in their marketing. It could be people who are, or it could be moms. It could be people who need to be comfortable and need ease at home. Skateboarding would be a completely different audience, right? We're going to have a different culture around our marketing. We're going to have a different people modeling. We're going to have different places we put the marketing. So all of these different categories suggest to you a completely different marketing approach in every way, right? They might be marketing very similar products, and yet they have to market them in very different ways. So that second level gives you so many new pieces of information, but that's actually not where they stop. Beyond that, they have some other things that you can do to tailor your preferences. You can tailor it by price, by color, technology, feel, surface, brand, and size. Some of those may indicate different target markets. Price point could, if somebody wants to pay a lot of money or not so much money, maybe they start to consider those different target markets. If people are on different surfaces, that could matter. People who care about the technology behind what they're wearing and people who don't, that may change things. So all of these things could signal different target markets, and they really want to get specific and pinpoint the thing that each of those people need to hear when they're talking to them. So that's how specific a big company gets. And how specific do you need to get when you're creating your target markets? So I think it's worth noting, because so often I'll say to somebody, who's your target market? And the person will say, everybody. Okay, well, sure, Nike does kind of make shoes for everybody if you look at that list. But people don't have to have shoes for everybody. They need to, I'm a skateboarder, I need the skateboarding shoes. Like the people are going to really want the thing that feels like it's specifically for them. So if you can package that up and present it to them, you're going to get their attention way more effectively than by saying, we've got shoes. So think about what that means for your business. I think people think that by staying general, they aren't losing audience. But it's really the opposite. If you're staying general and you're saying everybody should buy my stuff, you're not really cueing in anybody to listen. So we need to hook people in, and it's not about excluding them, it's about including them. Think about your marketing in that way, and it'll really change how you look at your target markets. Now, once you've got that, we start looking at the brand that speaks to your target market. And for this, I'm going to show you a brand statement exercise as sort of the foundation of this section. I'm curious, for those of you who are on with me live, have you ever done a brand statement exercise before? If you're not on with me live, just go back through your memory of the things that you've created for your business. Have you done a brand statement exercise? This isn't a mission statement. It's not an elevator pitch. It's something different. It's more of an internal exercise. So far, I'm getting a bunch of no's. So this will be fun. This is going to be something new to think about for crafting language around your business. A brand statement, let me define what it is first. A brand statement explains what you do, who you serve, and ultimately how you help those people. It is an internal exercise for your business. This is not meant to be perfect, finalized marketing copy that you present to the world. It's meant to be a brainstorming exercise for you to see all the language that you've got to pull from. And I also want to point out that I had mentioned this is another way to start defining target markets, because as you start doing brand statements for your business, based on each target market, you may start realizing, oh, I've got some more target markets than I thought I did. So this is a sideways way to also start understanding what your target markets are. Here's the exercise. Now, if you were to go online and you were to look up brand statement, you'd see a lot of formats out there. I've crafted this one because it's lengthy. I specifically chose it because it's going to force you to come up with a lot of language for your business. And again, this is a brainstorming exercise so that we want all that language for the future. It's going to be massive run-on sentences each time. Don't worry about that. It's just about creating little sound bites for yourself. So here's the basic structure for whoever the target market is, who want or need whatever it is they lack. My company provides whatever it is you give them that benefits them by whatever that primary benefit to your audience is. So they can, is there a positive impact to them now that they've had that benefit? So that's the overall structure that we're going to do. Now, my hope, especially knowing that, most people who are listening and at least who are live here haven't done an exercise like this. I'd like you to do this for your business. This is a great homework task to work through. But in order to do that, I want to give you a couple of examples so you can see how this sort of lives and breathes with the sample business. So I think I've invented a fictitious business called Move Right Physical Therapy. And if there is a Move Right Physical Therapy out there, it's not meant to be you. But Move Right Physical Therapy, I'm sure they could have many target markets. We're going to, just for the purposes of staying within our time frame here, I'm going to give you 2 target markets for them: competitive athletes and seniors. All right, so we're going to look at 2 examples, one for each of those target markets. Brands number 1, for competitive athletes who want or need to recover from a sports injury fully and quickly. My company provides committed care to get them back to 100% strength as soon as possible. That benefits them by getting them back to training while lessening the risk of re-injury so they can miss less time at practice and resume their normal workout schedule. Okay, huge sentence, right? A lot of language there. It's painful to those who like grammar. But what are the things here that signal this audience? Well, obviously straight away we're saying competitive athletes, that helps. Sports injury, those are some words that will probably hook them in. Speed is of the essence for this audience. They don't want to, it's opportunity cost. Every day they're not at practice is an opportunity they've lost. If they have to miss a game or a meet or a match, that could be devastating for them. So they want to get back to 100% strength, but they want to do it quickly. They want to do it as soon as possible. And they don't want to immediately get hurt right when they get back. So they're looking for somebody who's going to understand that.
Looks like we might have lost. Oh, Melissa,
Oops.
I think we lost you for a minute.
Oh no. Well, let me just rewind 30 seconds or so there. I'm so sorry about that. Who knows with the internet these days? So basically what we're saying here is, by signaling that you understand this audience, you're saying, I know how to serve you. All these specific words in here matter to them. And we want to plant the words that will matter. Let's look at seniors and see how that changes things. For seniors dealing with pain, who want or need a full recovery so they can resume light daily activities without pain, my company provides committed care to rehabilitate injuries and build strength to prevent future discomfort. That benefits them by providing a steady long-term solution for their pain so they can return to the activities they love most without fear of further damage. Now, look at how different this one is. For this one, we're using specific words like activities, preventing future discomfort, steady long-term solution. they're not necessarily looking for get me back as fast as possible. They're looking for the long term here. And, they're not looking to put a ton of strain on their bodies with, the athletic activities that are going to push them to their limits. They just want to do the light daily activities that they love. And so you can already see how different these brand statements are. And yet, here's the thing, Move Right Physical Therapy does exactly the same thing for both of these audiences. You hurt your elbow, you're going to get a list of exercises. You're going to ice, you're going to heat, there's certain things that they're going to do because that's how a body heals. But they need to talk to these audiences when they're marketing in ways that sound different so that those audiences know, oh, you really understand me. You can help me. So it starts to give you an indication. Now, if you do an exercise like this and it starts introducing you to the fact, oh, I thought I had 3 target markets, but now that I'm doing this, I'm throwing in language that signals another target market. This may feel like it opens up a can of worms, but it's good for us to find the limits. It's good for us to find the edges. So the more target markets you realize you have, make a brand statement for each of them, and you can always prioritize how many you're really going to try to market to based on the resources that you have. Do this exercise first, and then figure out your strategy behind which ones can I really focus on. So having said all that, I do hope that you're going to do this exercise for your business afterwards. So here are some quick tips to remember as you do it. First of all, focus only on your audience, not on you. Yes, tell them what you provide, but the benefit is not to your business. The benefit is to them. That's what they care about. That's how they're going to make their purchasing decisions. So focus on what they need to hear from you, not on how they are going to benefit you. When you're doing this, speak a language so relevant that they choose to listen. Don't just general because you think that'll keep more people on your list. Look target market by target market and get specific so that you're cueing them in to listen to you. Focus on one audience at a time, right? That's why we have different brand statements. If you've got multiple audiences, that's totally fine. Get specific with your message for each of them. And by doing that, you can make the value clear to them. So already by looking at, seniors versus competitive athletes, you can see that the value to them is a little is communicated differently. They're looking for slightly different things. And by the way, if Move Right Physical Therapy wanted to, they could take even for, let's say, the competitive athletes target market, they could break that out into different sports. They could have one for skiers, one for basketball players, one for gymnasts, one for swimmers. They might all have different types of injuries or different language they need to hear. And so when you really start looking at the value proposition for each of these audiences, you can get more specific and more compelling about that by breaking them down more specifically into different target markets. And again, be consistent and persistent with your brand statement. Something I hear from a lot of business owners is they feel uncomfortable that people are going to get bored with their message if they keep delivering the same type of message. And it's really not the case. You might start to get bored with your message, but they may not even have heard it yet. You haven't created that pattern in their brain yet. You haven't necessarily hooked them in with your message for them to be bored with it. So only by being consistent and persistent can we get people to know who we are and not be confused about who we are. Stay the course. And that's why we develop these brand statements with a lot of language so that you have a few different options on how you approach them and what you focus on, but that you stay consistent with it over time. Now, last section here that I wanted to look at is really kind of my favorite section. And this is just some fun psychological tips and tricks so that you can capture people's attention. So let's look at some of the things that you can layer in now that you're more aware of your target market and more aware of your brand. What are some of the cues you can give people? Well, let's remember, you may have seconds to reach your audience. There's so many different ways that we market to people where we're fighting for attention with a million other messages. So how do you get somebody to instantly recognize that they need to stay on your message. That is the challenge that we have. Let's look at some of the different elements of our message. The colors of your brand. This is one, that can get people's attention pretty quickly. Colors mean something. And chances are you are not going to re-educate people about what a color means based on what you think you want it to mean for your business. It's better if we lean in. So as long as somebody isn't colorblind, they've been seeing these colors and getting certain associations with it their whole life. And so let's lean into that instead of lean away. Now, I've pulled this graphic together, compositing a bunch of different color charts. I do want to specify that this is for the US. If you were marketing to people in another country, you should probably look up what colors mean in that country just to be sure, because sometimes it's pretty different. But if you start to look at this and think about what colors you're using now for your business, or what colors you are thinking about using, let's just use this as a guide to get started and see what says the message that you want it to say for your business. Now, having said that, this obviously speaks to putting visuals behind your marketing. So another thing that'll do that is imagery. I love this image because it really shows you how effectively you can signal your audience. This signals two audiences without saying a word. It's an ad from Starbucks, but it hooks in a Star Wars audience without saying anything, without breaking any licensing, and there's no infringement here. They've got Starbucks cups, but then they just put it in a backdrop of space. They have those cups that are dueling, and then you see those straws kind of lit up a little bit like lightsabers. Suddenly you're reaching a whole new market, right? Just with an image. So this is really, obviously this is a specific image that you're probably not going to use, but what is relevant to the people who you're trying to attract to get their attention instantly. Now, another interesting one, when we see something in print, the words themselves mean something, but the way they're written also does. So here are 5 different categories of types of fonts, right? We've got serif fonts. You can see they have those little hooks on the end. Tends to be used in print, especially like, let's say, books. It's a little more formal, a little bit more traditional. Whereas you go for something like the sans serif category, usually you're going to see that more in web content. It could be a little bit cleaner, a little bit more universal and easier to convey, especially through online content. Script. Already this feels very different, doesn't it? Some people associate this with being feminine, but I would say more often than not, we think of like fancy when we think of script. So you would use it in things where you need to be fancier. Invitations could be an example for that. Now, this 4th category is the display or decorative category. There's a wide variety in this category. You're going to see the one that I chose, very bold. It's like kind of a Halloween sort of feel. Again, it's really expressive. Now, if you saw a whole flyer in this, it might start to get hard to read after a while. So sometimes we'll use display or decorative fonts for like headlines, and then we'll put the rest of the copy in something that's a little bit easier to read. But it just depends on what that font actually is. And then the last one that we've got here is the modern category of fonts, which a lot of times you'll see graphic designers using things like this. They're a little more forward looking, a little more stylish, maybe a little cooler. So this, depends on the market. One of the fonts that I primarily use is in this category of modern fonts, and it's been all throughout this presentation. Now, another thing when you've got visuals is shape. Shapes, you'll often see shapes incorporated into logos in ways that use these principles. So if you see like a square or a box, that's, really implying order, security. Triangles can be considered a masculine symbol when it comes to imagery like this, but it usually just means energy or power. Circles can be considered a more feminine symbol, but usually it's meant to be to suggest connection or community. You'll see circles used a lot when we want to talk about community, especially in something like logos that only have a moment to convey your message. So I wanted to give you an example of how much visuals can actually change the meaning of what you're trying to say. Each of these three things say Friday the 13th, right? Which one is your eye drawn to first? What does that say about you? What does it say about the graphic? So, you look at the one on the left, it feels like a Jane Austen novel to me, something about that. That middle one there is like a kid's party. That one on the end, it looks like it's straight out of a horror movie. But how did they get there, right? They were playing with colors. They were playing with font styles. They were playing with the imagery that they put behind it. That is the whole way that they completely changed the meaning of Friday the 13th between these three different graphics. So already you start to see how important it is to choose wisely, to be careful about all the components of what you put out there. Now, having said that, I did want to also mention just a little bit about the language. So a lot of times, sometimes we don't have an option for having visuals behind the message, but even if we do, what words are you using? What words are triggering your audience to pay attention to you, that are attracting the right people to come to your message? So there are some words like, if you can pull words from your brand statements, for example, words that you've already decided are relevant for that audience. You can hone in on pain points. Somebody who, if you're saying, oh, I'm having trouble sleeping at night, the people who are having trouble sleeping at night are going to be interested to hear what you have to say. They're going to maybe think this person might have some information that would be useful to me. So you're really hooking in those people by addressing the pain point. But also, you can hook people in by talking about sort of adjectives that they resonate with. And I think this needs a couple of examples to explain this. So one that I happen to like, I'm sure a lot of us have heard of the company Jif, the peanut butter company. I don't know if Jif does other things, but I know them as the peanut butter company. Choosy moms choose Jif. I think this one is really interesting because they're not saying moms choose Jif. Maybe you're a mom, you don't choose Jif, right? And then this isn't true. They're saying choosy moms choose Jif. So they're basically throwing down the gauntlet for moms. Hey moms, if you care about what you're putting in your kids' bodies, if you're diligent about nutrition, then you choose Jif. The other moms can go buy some other brand of peanut butter, but the choosy moms, those are the people that we want. So they're asking moms to self-select into this elite category of choosy moms. And they do that with one word. So that can be something that sort of asks people to self-select into your audience. You also see, for example, a company like Snickers. My goodness, the way they use the word hungry. It's everywhere. And note the font size. It's not only it's everywhere, it's like we don't want you to miss the word hungry. And they've said it in commercials, they say it in print ads, they say it all over the place. These two graphics are pulled from online. It's a word they're really leveraging because they want you to feel hungry so that they can provide the solution. So it's, think about how important that word becomes. And, is there something like that you can use to capture your audience? So with all of that said, I could talk about the psychology of marketing for days and days. It's so fun to me, but it starts to show you how much power you have with these little choices that you make and how important it is to make those little choices. If you know all of that, right? If you've got a solid foundation of your audience and brand, your marketing can turn into sales. To get there, you've got to get the right people's attention, you've got to keep it, and you got to keep them with your message until they're ready. But hopefully today's conversation about target market and brand helps you do those things so that you can generate the sales that you want. Now, I do want to make sure to save enough time for questions here for those of you who have any. So a quick reminder on what we talked about. For those of you who are on with me live, this will be a good chance to remind yourself of the questions that you had. If you're not on with us live, but you want to talk to the SBDC or schedule an appointment with them, this may help remind you of the questions you want to ask. So we talked about the foundation of your marketing, which we broke down as target markets in this case. Then we talked about who are your target markets. How do you figure that out? What do you need to research to decide who your target markets are? Then once you know that, how do you create the brand that'll speak to your target markets? That's where we looked at brand statements. And then lastly, once you got all that foundation, then we start putting the window dressing on it, the psychological tricks to capture your audience's attention. So if you have any questions about any of those things, and you're on live, feel free to put those into the chat. And otherwise, just keep those teed up for your next consultation with the SBDC. Now, as you're getting any questions, and I do want to remind you, we have one more session coming up in this series. So I believe this is next week, same time as this session, marketing your business from a driver's seat. That one is going to look more at the psychology of marketing and sales and actually taking a position of power. What are some of the things that you can do to take a position of power in your marketing and sales and hopefully be more effective in motivating your audience to make the purchase or take the call to action? So that one's going to be really fun. That's coming up in 1 week. All right, so I do want to for questions. As a reminder, for those who are interested in booking some time with somebody from the SBDC to talk about any of these things, there's a link here on the screen that helps you get to the website so that you can connect with them. But I will turn this back over to Paul and Brett and see if there are any questions that we've got here.
Please feel free to put your questions or comments in the chat room. That would be great. I have a question for you though, Melissa. Looking at all of these marketing strategies, I had no idea that I could actually look at the different brands or the different types of shoes for tennis shoes, for athletic shoes, and just kind of think through, okay, why are they including these people in these pictures of the shoes? That was very interesting to me. And I love the font size. That was really something. All of these things should be part of a marketing plan, correct?
I believe so. I think a lot of times when you look at formal business plans and you look at the marketing section, so often they stay quantitative and it's like, how many people are in your audience? And of this whole market, how many people do you need? And I actually think that's a bit of a disservice to businesses. I know it's important to have a structure like that for going out and getting loans and things like that. So it's good information to have, but if you only know marketing at that high level, you wouldn't know how to execute it. And so this is the type of detail we want to get into to really say, this is how I'm going to effectively approach my audience. And the more specific you can get with this, really the more it does trigger people, like the thing that you just noticed, looking at other companies and starting to see how they're breaking it down. I think as hopefully now that you've seen this presentation, you go out into the world, you start looking at other people's marketing and you're looking at different things than you used to now, right? It's like, oh, I'm noticing your font. I'm noticing the model that you chose. I'm noticing all these little choices that you made that speak to me or don't. You might even, this is the easiest thing to practice too, because we're being marketed to all day long. So it's like, what are they trying to tell me? What are they trying to tell me? And as you can start spotting that, maybe it becomes a little easier to decide how you are going to craft your message. That's the trick, really starting to then say, okay, now I need to make my brand. And what are the decisions I'm going to make? So I absolutely think that businesses should be putting this into their own plan. And, hopefully, with your help, they can get there and really get crystal clear on all these audiences.
Brett, did you want to say something?
I did have one question while we have Melissa here. I think everybody could benefit from, hopefully, if nothing else, I know I would. I encounter a lot of people that are wildly creative with their branding and their marketing. In fact, so much so that they spend an awful lot of time rebranding. Do you have any words of advice, that's professional advice, for those of you out there that are just now watching this or possibly later listening carefully? Do you have any words of advice for those people that are very creative and always changing their brand? Should they keep it for a certain amount of time at least, or is there a way to evaluate if it's working or not? I don't know. I'm asking for some professional tip there.
Such a good question. I would sort of like to answer that by saying, let's not throw rebranding around lightly, right? Your audience needs to understand what your business is. And the more you're switching it up, the less they know what it is. Because it's like, is it this, especially if you're making big changes, is it this thing? Is it the thing you're showing me today? Is it the thing you're showing me? What do I know about what your brand is? What is the consistent thread running between all these changes? That's a lot for an audience to have to think about. So when we talk about rebranding, you'll see big companies that rebrand. The rebrand doesn't happen overnight. They'll say something great is coming next month, like we're working on something wonderful. They'll survey people. They'll gather information from their audiences. They will spend months teasing a change, and then they'll change it. And then they'll put all this PR around it, and then they'll spend months talking about, oh, remember we used to do this, but now we're doing this. And it's something that they'll actually spend quite a lot of time helping their audience adjust to the changes that they wanted to make. And that is a great thing to do if the rebrand helps you get in line one time with what you really are now. You don't want to just keep an old brand because you don't want to change if it's not relevant anymore. But rather than thinking about your brand as an ever evolving species that, people have to figure out what it is today, have a brand. If you've left that brand behind, change it, but really educate your audience and keep them with you in the process. Because if you don't, they won't know who you are anymore. A lot of times, the business owner doesn't know who they are, and that's why it's changing so much. So, this is something to really root those questions. Why do I feel like I need to make those changes? And what am I saying with those changes? I hope that helps clarify it. We don't need to change it all the time, just when it's really needed. Awesome.
For some reason, something came to my mind when you were talking about changing the brand and the product and what is it, and I kept thinking about New Coke.
Coke is actually one of the company I was thinking of too. They're the ones that have, I think, rebranded like as a rule more often than not. It seems like every so often they're just like, we're going to be new. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. There are big companies that have tried to rebrand and it has massively failed. And they've had to go back. So, I believe Gap actually did something years ago where they went from being like having like a traditional logo and look, and then they tried to modernize it, and people were like, no, we don't come to you for modern, we come to you for basic. Stop it. And so they went back. And it's interesting. The big companies, they're going to get their feedback on a bigger scale, right? But we're all going to get the feedback somehow. Sometimes it's that people don't know who you are, so they don't buy something from you if you have a small business.
Yeah, or if you make that drastic change in your product or in your advertising, like talking about the change in the Gap logo, I don't recognize you anymore. I'm afraid now to buy your product. So.
Yeah, and it's so interesting you mentioned Coke because they're like the one company that I can think. There might be others out there, but they're the one company I can think of that's sort of an anomaly. Like it's like fashion. They put on a new coat every time they're out, It's interesting to see that company does that. I don't know if that works for them or if they lose people. I don't know. I think people have probably had to absorb the fact that Coke is going to have new looks and new campaigns and new efforts. But, they probably had to earn that over time. So it's if there are other companies you can think of like that, let me know, because that's the one that comes to mind.
As long as they don't change the recipe, they're good. That didn't work out so well for them. But yeah, if you have any other questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. I'm going to talk about some of the things that we have coming up. And Melissa, as always, this was wonderful. And I want to thank you so much for joining us and sharing this information. You will be receiving a survey in your email. Please fill that out and return it to us. Let us know how we can improve our webinar series. Also, if you would like copies of Melissa's presentation for today, put your email address on the survey. We'll make sure that you get it. Let's see, we have the upcoming webinars. this afternoon. It is a doubleheader Thursday. Team conflict, how to make it productive with Lorna Kibbe. That should be pretty interesting. Then we have a new presenter. Angela Robinson is going to talk about choosing the right business structure for your business. And then on Tuesday, we have a doubleheader. Yay. Oh, our new QuickBooks series, part 2, Intro to QBO, part 2. And then in the afternoon, Rebecca Schultz is coming back, using government debt strategically. That's going to be an interesting topic, especially with all of the COVID support products that have been out there over the past couple of years. And then you're back next, that's Thursday, isn't it? Next Thursday for the last in your series. And I'm going to miss having you here for a while, I guess. Marketing your business from the driver's seat. That should be a lot of fun. You can go to our website, sbdc.nctc.edu, and you can find all sorts of resources. You can register for these webinars. You can get the contact information or schedule an appointment with an advisor. Also on our website, there are a lot of resources already out there for that small business owner or the person thinking, that entrepreneur, the person thinking about starting a small business. We have, oh, and you can use the QR code in the upper right-hand corner, and it'll take you straight to our Eventbrite, and you can also register for upcoming webinars there. Want to thank our benefactors, the Small Business Administration, the State of Texas, North Texas SBDC Regional Office, and the North Central Texas College. With their support, we are able to offer all of our services to you at no cost. Thank you all for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you this afternoon. And we will be ending the webinar now. Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.